Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf we begin with the beginning of the fourth parak of the Masechta, parak Taraf Bekalpi, which discusses how the Kohen Gadol drew the lots on the two goats to determine which one went as a carbon chatas la Hashem and which one went la Azazel. The Gemara will launch into an Agadata discussing the various brachas which existed in the Beis Hamikdash during the time of Shimon HaTzadik and how they left when he passed away, and how they were not there at all under any circumstances in the last 40 years before the Churban, before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Mishnah begins and it says that he had the box, as we had said, describing the scene. The Kohen Gadol stood with two goats, one on his left, one on his right. Also on his left and his right were the Sgan HaKohen, the assistant Kohen Gadol, who was on his right, and the Rosh Beis Av, the head of the family of Kohanim, who was supposed to serve that day in the Beis Hamikdash. Had it not been Yom Kippur, he stood on the Kohen Gadol's left. So what did they do? They had two lots in a box. The Kohen Gadol reached in quickly and grabbed them out. And one of them said on it La Hashem, and one of them said on it La Azazel. And he had one on his left and one on his right. And he put both hands in the box at once and pulled them out. Now, the Sgan, the assistant Kohen, and the Rosh Beis Av would look at them. And if the one, La Hashem, was on the right, then the Sgan would say, Ishi Kohen Gadol, my master, Kohen Gadol, lift up your right hand. And if it was on the left, then the Rosh Beis Av, who was on that side, would say, Ishi Kohen Gadol, lift up your left hand. Then he would take the two lots and he would put them on the two goats, the one on the right, the one on the left, and he would say, what would he say? Machlokas. According to the Tanna Kama, he would say, La Hashem chatas. For Hashem is this carbon chatas, referring to the one that said La Hashem. According to Rabbi Shmuel, he would just say La Hashem, he didn't have to say chatas. And as soon as he said Hashem, everyone there said, Baruch Hashem Kohen Machol Soili Lam Vayed. Those two people there, the Skan and the Rosh Beis Av, said, Baruch Hashem Kohen Machol Soili Lam Vayed, as we say when we hear the Shem Hashem HaMefarish. So Gemara asks, why does he have to grab it out of the box? The Gemara begins, the Gemara says, why does he have to grab it out of the box? Why can't he take it out of the box gently and softly? The Gemara says, we want to make sure that he doesn't feel and try to figure out which one is La Hashem and which one is La Azazel, because it was always a good sign when the one La Hashem came up in the right hand of the Kohen. We don't want him to try, we want it to come up, whatever comes up, and that's it. Rava says this box that they had was made out of wood, and it was chol. It was not kodesh, it was not one of the kli Kardish, you could only fit two hands in it. There was no other space for anything else over there. So the Gemara says, let's see. I understand that it only fits two hands. That way there's no room for him to move his hands around. He could just grab each lot, and that's it. Pull it out. But why does it have to be chol? Why can't it be Kodesh? The Gemara says it can't be Kodesh because it's made out of wood. And you cannot have a kli shares made out of wood. Kli shares have to be made out of silver or gold. So the Gemara says, make it out of silver or gold. The Gemara says, no, we have a rule that the Torah does not make expensive things for Klal Yisrael, expensive requirements, and therefore it was made out of cheap wood. There was no requirement to make it out of silver or gold. Okay, now the Gemara says that our Mishnah does not seem to fit with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda in a different brisa has a different description of this procedure. Our Mishnah says that the Kohen Gadol reached in with both hands and took one out in his left and one in his right. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it was all right hands. The Kohen Gadol picked one up in his right hand, and the assistant Kohen Gadol, the Skan, picked one up in his right hand. And then the Kohen Gadol would show it to the Rosh Beis Av and the Skan, the one that he was holding. And if the Kohen Gadol was holding the one that said on it La Hashem, he would say, Ishi Kohen Gadol Hagba Yemincha, lift up your right hand. But if the Kohen Gadol was holding the one that said La Azazel, then the Rosh Beis Av would say, Kohen Gadol, say a word, meaning he would just tell him to say Chatas La Hashem, meaning referring to the one that was being held by the Skan. So Gemara says, why did the Rosh Beis Av have to get involved? Why can't the Skan say it either way? One was being held by the Kohen Gadol, one was being held by the Skan at this point. So what is the Rosh Beis Av involved? So the Gemara says no, because if the Kohen Gadol was holding the one on the left, if the Kohen Gadol is holding the one that said La Azazel, we don't want the Skan to be the one to say you're holding the one La Azazel. to indicate that, because it means that the Skan himself is holding the one Lashem, and the Kohen Gadol would be upset if he's the one who's holding it and he tells him that you're not holding it. And therefore, it was said by the Rosh Beis Av. So now the Gemara says, okay, so our Mishnah obviously doesn't fit with that. And who is the author of our Mishnah? The Gemara says it's Rabbi Chanina Skana Kahanim. You have a brisa where Rabbi Chanina Skana Kahanim says that the whole function of the Skana Kohen, the whole function of the assistant Kohen, of which he apparently was one, the whole function is to be there in case something happened to the Kohen Gadol. He wasn't able to finish the avoda. The Skan would be there, but there was no avoda that he did himself. He was not involved unless something happened to the Kohen Gadol. Now the Gemara brings a brisa discussing the bracha that happened in the days of Shimon HaTzadik. The Gemara says all the years of Shimon HaTzadik, the lot for La Hashem came up in his right hand. Afterwards, after the 40 years was over, after he passed away, sometimes it came up in the Kohen Gadol's right hand, sometimes in the left hand. Next bracha was that the tongue of red wool, which was put around the horns of the goat which went Lazazel, and a corresponding one left in the Azara. In all the days of Shimon HaTzadik, it always turned white, which was a sign that Hashem had accepted Klal Yisrael's tshuva and that He forgave them. He was mechaper for them. From afterwards, it sometimes turned white and sometimes it did not turn white. Next bracha was that in the menorah, the western ner burned longer than all the other ners. Miraculously, it had a longer time. It was a special sign of Shechina, that the Shechina was there in the west. Now, there's a machokes if the menorah was set up east to west. If it did, then the west is understood simply. But according to the version that was set up north to south, then west has to mean the central one, which is the only flame which isn't turned or angled in any particular direction as it burns. Next bracha, the Gemara says that the fire on the Mizbeach all the days of Shimon HaTzadik burned brightly, and there was no need to add any wood to it. The only wood that was added was the 2 logs that was added as part of the avoda of the Karbanet Talmud, which is a mitzvah, but you didn't have to add more than that. However, afterwards, sometimes the fire was doing well, and sometimes it was doing poorly, and Kahanim could add wood in all day in order to keep the fire going. Next bracha was that there was a bracha in the barley of the Karban Omer, and in the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos, and in the Lechem Hapanim. And any Kohen who received a piece of it, he would eat it, and he would either be full or would it be too much for him, and he would actually leave some over. But afterwards, there was no bracha of the light left, the Gemara says, in the Omer, the Shtei Lechem, and the Lechem Hapanim, and each Kohen got the size of a bean, and it wasn't enough for them. So those who were tzaddikim would say, okay, that's enough, I'm not taking more, or I don't need that much. But those who are a bit ravenous would grab more than they were supposed to get. And there was a case where somebody actually grabbed his portion and he grabbed somebody else's portion from him. From afterwards, they called him the Ben Chamtzon. Ben Chamtzon meaning the bandit, the thief. So that's what they called him until the day he died. So Gemara says, how do you know the word Chamtzon means a thief? Gemara quotes the Psukim. One in the Tehillim, Malakai Paltainim Yad Rasha Mikaf Ma'avel V'Chaimit. Save me from the wicked, from the hand of those who do evil, and Chaimitz, those who steal. And then the next pasuk is in Yeshayahu, Limdu Heitev Dishu Mishpat, teach goodness and search out justice. Ashru Chaimitz, support the one who is robbed. Shiftu Yasayim Rihu Almana, and do justice for the orphan and fight on behalf of the widow. So you see again that Chamoitz means the one who is robbed, so Chometz is the one who is doing the robbing. Okay, the Gemara brings another brisa about Rabbi Shimon, about Shimon HaTzadik. The Gemara says that all the years that Shimon HaTzadik was alive, he was fine. In the last year of his life, when he went in on Yom Kippur, he said, when he came out, he said, this year I'm going to die. He said, how do you know? He said, every year I see an old man coming in with me, dressed in white clothing, and he joins me, and he comes in with me to the Kodesh Kodashim, and he comes out with me. This year, I saw an old man dressed in black clothing, and he came in with me, he did not come out with me. And so what happened, as soon as Sukkot was over, he became ill. He was ill for 7 days, and then he died 7 days after Sukkot, which is his yahrzeit. So says the Kohanim, when they said the Berachas Kohanim afterwards, did not say it with the Shem Hashem, because they did not have the merit, and they were not kedai like Shimon HaTzadik was. Now the Gemara goes on, brings a brisa discussing the last 40 years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So the Gemara says, last 40 years, the lot of the carbon Lashem never came up in the Kohen's right hand; it was always in the left hand. The strip of wool never turned white. The western candle never burned longer than the other ones, and the doors of the Heichel would open on their own. They would always stand open as an invitation, ki'ilu, for the enemy to come in and destroy the place. The Gemara says that's what happened until Yechon ben Zakkai, who was there at the time, yelled at the doors of the Heichel, and he said, "Why are you trying to scare everyone? We know that you're going to be destroyed. We already have the nevuah of Zechariah. We know that he said, Pasach Levanon adlasech v'tochel eish ba'arzecha." The doors of the Levanon, which refers to the Beis Hamikdash, will open, and a fire will burn its cedar wood. So you don't have to scare everybody like that. So when it says, why is Beis Hamikdash called Levanon? So when it says Levanon from the word Malbin, that it whitens the sins of Yisrael. The Gemara also says, why is Beis Hamikdash sometimes called Yar, as the pasuk says, Beis Yar HaLevanon? Because it's like a forest. Yar means a forest. Just like a forest sprouts fruits and flowers, Beis Hamikdash also sprouted fruits and flowers, like the Gemara explains. When Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash, he planted a golden fruit tree, and it would give fruits, and that would support the Kohanim. And when the wind would blow, they would fall. Kohanim would use them, like the pasuk says, Yirash Kalvanon Pirio. Once the Oivdei Kechavim came in and to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, it withered, like it says, Parach Levanon Umlal. The blossoming of the Levanon is wasted away, and it's nabach in the future. Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to return it, like it says, Parach Tifrach v'Tagal Avgilo v'Ranin Kvod HaLevanon, that the Levanon will be restored and will grow and flower again. Okay, the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah. We had seen that he has to take the two lots and put one on each of the goats. So the Gemara brings a brisa. The Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol mentions Hashem's name throughout the Kippur service 10 times. What are the 10 times? He says Vidoy 3 times, and each Vidoy has Hashem's name in it 3 times. Like he says, Ana Hashem, as part of his tefillah, and then he says, Ana Bashem Kaperna, and then when he quotes the pasuk, Ki b'yamazeh yichaper aleichem, also has Hashem's name there in the pasuk itself. 3 vidoy is 3 times in each vidoy is 9, and plus 1 when he says chatos l'Hashem or says l'Hashem, that is the kol again. Now the sound of the Kohen Gadol saying the Shem Hashem would travel all the way till Yericho, which Rabbi Baruch Chana says was a distance of 10 parsa, very far distance. Also, the hinges of the Heichel could be heard in all 8 tchumin, all 8 regions of Shabbos in the city of Yericho. Now, the goats in Yericho would even sneeze from the scent of the Ketores. Women in Yericho did not have to put on perfume because the scent of Ketores would stuck to them. A Kala in Yerushalayim didn't have to adorn herself. Rashi says they used to adorn themselves with perfumes, all from the scent of the Ketores which hung in the air. The Gemara quotes Rabbi Yosi ben Dulgai, who says that his father had goats in a place called Har Michmar. That's where the Mishkan was in Shiloh, and they would sneeze from the scent of Ketores. Whereas Avin says that one old man had told him, once I was in Shiloh and I smelled the smell of Ketores between the walls of the buildings there, all the way back from the time that the Mishkan was in Shiloh, many, many hundreds of years earlier.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.